Good afternoon. In the interest of everybody's time, I think we should start now. And Provost Griffith has asked me to open the meeting for him. He's still in the Senate at this moment. There's not only curriculum, as it were, before the Senate, but also the new constitution that we're gonna, or charter that we're gonna vote on. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this table for, I believe it's the third Provost conversation on research and scholarships. And today's topic is going to focus on grant writing. And I'm very happy and pleased to welcome to be with us this afternoon Professor Beth Rosenthal, Dr. Will Decimero, and I was just checking in the math department. We're still waiting for Dr. Lydia Gonzalez, who is giving exam at this moment. I didn't find a classroom, and I'm sure she is aware that she will have to be here very soon. So I'm not sure what the arrangement was made down there for her to be replaced during the exam, and I'm sure she's going to be with us momentarily. So the way this works is we are giving everybody about, the three presenters, I should say, we give 10 to 15 minutes. Talk a little bit about their, in this case, the grant writing efforts, the process of applying, the identifying of suitable grants that suit your research topic, preliminary research that will have to be done, conversations with the donor agencies or representatives of these agencies, anything really that you find relevant, important to share with colleagues to know that might help them in whatever discipline they're coming from. So if you would like to, talk 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll really open up to sort of a Q&A. And then if Provost Griffith will join us, I'm sure he'll have a few remarks of his own as well, depending when he'll be able to join us at what moment. So that said, although I'm sure we're relatively a small college, everybody knows each other. Just a few words: Professor Rosenthal, full professor in social sciences, focusing in her research on stress, something I really need some advice on that time of the year. Post-traumatic stress disorders, resilience in stressful and after stressful situations. Definitely, we'll have a private conversation later on. But I don't want to talk about your research. If you want to what extent you want to build of your research into the presentation, please feel free to do so. Will Decimero in the chemistry department. I will not even attempt to explain what Will is doing. This is too far from what I'm involved in. But again, please feel free to let folks know how your research will, what sort of influence it has on the grant writing process and vice versa. And then Lydia Gonzalez, among other things, in the math department is doing research and work on the didactics, the teaching of mathematics, equality issues in that process of teaching to different populations. Again, I don't want to venture too far into what Lydia is doing, but again, she will be invited to speak for herself on those matters. So with that said, shall we start maybe to my far right, Beth?
I'm not far right, I'm far left.
You're far left, okay, let me turn around. Good, thank you very much.
Okay, so I thought I'd start with a quote from Samuel Beckett, who said, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better." That sort of says how grants are written. So you keep improving. So a word about my background. Obviously, I'm social science faculty here at York. I'm also have an appointment at the Graduate Center where I teach in addition. I have received large and small grants, and I'm going to, give you snippets about each. In addition, I serve on NIH review, so I know what they're kind of looking for because I'm looking along with them. I chair one of the 18 PSC CUNY Research Award panels, so I have that knowledge also. I was formerly at York the program director of the MBRS program when it had a different structure. I had a postdoctorate, and notwithstanding all my wonderful background, I have had grant proposals denied. So I've had them rejected also, so I know what it feels like and what it is like. So the provost asked us to say something, first of all, about big and small grants. So I have received 7 NIH grants. 4 of them were 4-year competitive grants, and 3 of them were called supplements of various sorts when the stimulus money was around and so forth. My current grant, which is for $300,000, $75,000 a year, this focuses on, as Holger intimated, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's a new conceptualization of PTSD, which goes from a different conceptualization from the current psychiatric formulation, which is you either have it or you don't have it, and then you have these symptoms and many of these symptoms, and I study it rather from a broader perspective, where it isn't just yes, no, it's gradations. That's a rough summary. The largest NIH grant I ever got was for $750,000 in direct costs for 4 years. And that was my second NIH grant. That was not the second grant proposal I ever put in. It was the second NIH. And that topic was exposure to community violence and psychosocial outcomes. I've had a number of small grants, a bunch of PSC CUNYs where you have an opportunity to cut your teeth on writing grant proposals. I've had one from the School of Public Health at CUNY. I've had several other small ones. My very first grant here, after coming to York, I hate to say how many years ago, but it was in 1993. The second year I was here, I got what they used to have, faculty development grants, very teeny little grants, $1,000, and it was, wonderful, I thought, and helped me begin the process. So, a few words about the fact that research is rewarding. It's rewarding, but it's an enormous amount of work. I mean, it's a huge, huge effort. It isn't you just decide you're going to do it one day and there it is. But it's rewarding in 3 broad ways as I see it. One is if you participate in knowledge development, which is a main reason many of us came into academia. I think it helps tremendously with teaching, helps you focus your teaching better. And more specifically in this context today, it adds to your professional development. I think that a well-thought-through, well-written grant proposal helps you to do better research, whether or not it's funded. You've thought it, yes, you're shaking your head. I mean, it really helps you sharpen your thinking, helps you become clearer, more focused, figure out more specifically what you want to do. And even if the proposal is not funded, which as I said, I've had that experience, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not good. It may mean, first of all, there's a lot of competition. Second of all, it may mean that the topic is not a priority then, but it may become a priority. Or it may mean that you have to strengthen it, and it could be funded later. So, okay, the next area I want to talk about is the provost asked us to name or identify some do's and don'ts of grant proposal writing. So here's a series of do's, and then I'll come to the don'ts. I think I numbered 5 do's. First do, be prepared to develop your background, quote unquote, before actual proposal preparation. I mean, this is an ongoing thing. I'm sure Gila can attest to that. This is an ongoing thing. You don't just start and then quit and stop reading. You continue throughout your research career. You have to be prepared to invest energy, time, hard work, weekends, nights, etc., over several years before you're anywhere near ready to apply, in my opinion, for a large grant. And then there are no guarantees. You have to become the world's expert in something, and you have to really be that expert. It takes, as I said, a great deal of reading, thinking, and knowledge prior to the submission of a proposal. You have to have conducted pilot studies. I mean, it's practically required, essentially required. In the applied fields, which I'm in, postdocs are not the norm. So if you're in an applied field or some other hard science field or some areas of psychology, you have not had a postdoc, I would strongly, strongly encourage you to get yourself one. Now, you can't necessarily go work outside now, but you can try to apprentice yourself to somebody, and it doesn't have to be in York, it could be in CUNY or some other part of the New York City or non-New York City area. I mean, I just had an email from somebody at Hostos who asked if I would do this very thing. And you have to get somebody who's willing to put the time and effort, which of course cuts out your own research, but it's something that's extremely useful. You need knowledge of the funder. That's my second do. Know thy potential funder. You really have to know him or her well. How it operates, its focus, its interests, and your proposal must fit the interests of the funder, or it doesn't matter how brilliant it is, they're not interested. If their focus is on violence and you writing about, who's your favorite author?
Peace?
Peace, well, peace would be good. But you know, I mean, if their focus is adolescence and you come in with a geriatric study, they're not gonna look at it. They're gonna put it aside until you find somebody else. Also, the research has to have been started before you apply for a proposal. You can't say, I'll do it. You know, they do not fund you to sit and think, except if you're a MacArthur awardee, in which case you have a background. But you're not funded to think, just think. You have to have demonstrated your plan, which comes to my next do, which is demonstrated competence to conduct research on a worthy idea. And I have 3 subtopics here. First, a track record. A track record is essential. Track record means publications in the area that you're looking for funding. If not in the area, and the very first one I applied for, I didn't have any in the area, but I showed how what I had done was relevant to this proposal that I was submitting. But you must have publications. You should have, and if you can have funded research, even small funding, even this little faculty development grant that I got, that shows that you're able to obtain and manage money. I mean, it shows something good, even if they're small grants. The second sub-area is you have to demonstrate the readiness of all components of your research. You can't say in social science, I'll go get myself a sample. That won't cut it. Who's the sample? You have to demonstrate feasibility. That is that you have access to these people with a letter from an agency, in my particular case, a letter on agency letterhead with them saying, we have agreed that Beth Rosenthal has access to blah, blah, blah. Not a promise, it has to be real. And or you should have collected pilot data on the same kinds of folks that whom you're interested in studying. So one is regarding a sample in social sciences. Another is regarding measures, or AKA scales. You have to have either develop the scales yourself, name the scales you're going to use, provide their what's called psychometric properties, that is their quality. You have to demonstrate they're good. You can't just say, I'll figure out some stress scale at the appropriate time. I mean, they'll stop reading then and there. A third thing that's not specific to social science is if you're going into a new area, or some of the MBRS grants require that you get a mentor or a consultant, you have to demonstrate not only you found someone relevant and you include their CV and it has to show how they're relevant, But they have to be willing. You can't just say, well, I'll get, Dr. Malkovich at some point. No, Malkovich has to write a letter and say, I will help Beth Rosenthal in the following ways, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be spelled out. And the budget allocated to the consultant has to be realistic, not too big, not too small. And it has to be big because people who read this stuff are knowledgeable, and if you either propose too much or too little, everybody knows this is, make-believe, it's not for real. And a letter from the consultant stating what he or she or they will do for you. A fourth do, and this is for NIH specific, you should get the university, the college and or the university's commitment to your proposed research. So for example, if you need a room, or you need labs, we would need a room for interviewing, say. You have to describe the room you're going to have, or you have been allocated. You have to give its location roughly and its size and how it fits with what you want to do. A letter from the college stating that we will give Beth Rosenthal this room when the grant comes, or she has access to it at the present time. It can't just be pie in the sky, because everybody knows about pie in the sky. Reassigned time, I know that the provost would probably have a fit if he heard me, but reassigned time, if it's stated in the proposal, shows a college's real willingness to help you with the research. The more they put in writing, the stronger the proposal. So just as I said, reassigned time. It was.
Heard that.
Yeah, heard that. Any other assistance that you need to have in your proposal, you need to spell out in the proposal, like local mentoring. If somebody at the college is going to provide you with local mentoring, a letter from that person saying what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. A fifth do, which is just some additional points, is start small. You don't expect to get $1 million right off the bat. I mean, it typically doesn't happen. It's nice if it does, but it doesn't usually happen. Start small, include publications. When I started academic work 25 years ago, I was at a small institution before I came here across the Hudson, Dominican College, and I did research. There was no such thing as funding there. I mean, it was a teeny little Catholic college, and it just didn't exist, and they weren't all that interested. You can do research without money. I mean, I did several studies up there. I had an interest in what I was doing. You have to put a lot of effort in, but I'll tell you in a minute, I'm not sure the effort is any less after you get the grant, which brings with it its own work. So it's possible, very possible, to do small studies on your own, and then you demonstrate that you can do it. So those are my 5 areas of B's. My don'ts are, don't not pay attention to all my do's. That is, develop your background, demonstrate competence to conduct research on a worthy idea, have a track record. I forgot to say this. I strongly encourage, I can't strongly encourage it enough, to get 1 or 2 people who are expert, whether at York or somewhere else, to critically review your proposal. And you be willing to have all those red marks and revise the entire thing, whole cloth, not necessarily tinker, because that doesn't usually work, but really revise the whole thing at least twice. That's my best advice. And all components should be ready to go. I mean, all systems should be ready to go. The measures, the sample, etc., the consultant. Not I'll wish for it and I'll let you know. And you should know your funder. The last thing I was asked to talk about is things I wish I'd known before I wrote the first or second grant proposal. I wish I'd known, I had no idea. I'd understood the time and effort that grant administration takes, how it eats into your creative research. You have to administer budgets, you have to pay people, you gotta deal with RF, you gotta deal with our grants office, you gotta deal with compliance issues, you didn't do this form, you have to do that form, they've changed the procedure for submitting IRB, and that can take hours on end, et cetera, et cetera. So I wish I'd known, I wish I'd be more knowledgeable about what came with the money, besides the money. Writing the proposal and getting it is just the start. Then come right and shaking your head. It's like a job. It's like being an administrator. I wish I'd known NIH better. I wish I'd understood the structure. I had to learn it on the job. I wish I had known about, as I said, administration. I wish I knew more about budgets. Now I do, but I didn't then. I wish I had some knowledge. I wish I knew something about setting up a lab, which I knew nothing about whatsoever. I learned, but it, took time. And I wish I'd known about how to attract and hire good research assistants, which is also a big job. I've learned it. I've got some great tips anybody wants, but it took me years to figure out how to do it and get people who really filled the bill. So I'll end with how I started, which was from Samuel Beckett. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better this time. And you asked for my bio.
Well, I'd ask, sorry, running late, Felipe Gonzalez, our third colleague at the Senate Group work. You have a packed critical agenda. And one of the reasons I'd asked for the bios is the following. I think what's true of most institutions is true of York. And that is sometimes you may have a colleague with whom you've been in contact for several years, but you don't know much about a colleague's work. You don't know much about a colleague's avocation. You don't know much about a colleague as a social person. So what we've been asking all the presenters to do is to help us as a college community better understand who our colleagues are and better understand their expertise. And again, this is true of many institutions. Sometimes your expertise is better known and recognized outside of your own institution than it is within. So I know that colleagues are reluctant to talk about themselves, but my job is to talk about us. I'd really like us not to just take the bios, but take them back to your departments. Have your colleagues in your departments understand the local expertise we've got in York and be able to turn to that expertise as we're doing here today. We did with the Fulbright, we did with the articles, we did with the books. The last session we had was on books. Wonderful expertise. If we don't know it, we can't use it. So the idea is to share that. So I want to thank Ruel and Beth and Lydia in her absence for allowing me to embarrass them by saying, I want you to have to be talked about, because there's expertise here which we should be able to tap in helping us all. For the benefit of colleagues who are here for the first conversation, we usually have an opportunity to have the presenters make all the presentations, and then we would have the Q&A conversation. And so we're going to turn to Ruel. My first comment in Ruel is congratulations. He's the new chair of chemistry. And so thanks, Ruel, for doing this, and over to you.
It's a good thing Ben came before me, because he has more of a detailed presentation of everything. The only scribble I have actually here is a phrase that says, "Don't be afraid to fail," and that's basically the main message. I mean, every time you apply, don't expect that it's going to get funded, but take that failure, as Ben mentioned, to your advantage. Most of the time, they will put comments as to what you should do, what was missing, and so on and so forth. So don't write, just say, okay, take it. I'll follow what they say and then do it again. If you fail again, keep doing it until you satisfy the reviewer's comments. It's no sense arguing with them about their review because they have the power and you don't. So they're basically in charge at this point, so just follow what they say. Even if you see it's very absurd, but you still have to comply with what they're saying. So, and because they have the last say. To the list of don'ts, I'm going to add one thing to what Ben mentioned, and that is don't forget to read the announcement carefully. So if the announcement says you have to submit 3 pages, don't argue with them and say, can I put it 3.5 or 3.25 or something like that. You have to follow to the letter their announcement. If they say you have to include this section, don't forget to include that section. So very, very meticulous in following word for word the announcement that they give you, especially NIH, NSF. They give very detailed requirements as to what they want to see. So besides instead of going through the litany again of what Beth mentioned, I decided probably to just give you my experience and maybe learn something from how I developed my research program here at your college. So it started when, of course, for all of us during graduate school, you learn the techniques that you need. And then for us, we were able to follow it up with postdoctoral positions. Again, learning new techniques that you can combine together to develop your own project. So if you look at my crazy bio, it details there what kind of techniques I've learned throughout the years and how I put it together to basically answer the type of research I'm working on at the moment. So through the years, I've looked at this technique, and I pick one. I pick one which is related to I call usually the dance of the molecules. As we all know, molecules always are in constant motion. All the bonds in the molecules are always going to be moving. And then this motion has to be affected by some sort of interaction when they come together with another substance. Let's take, for example, an enzyme and a substrate. So an enzyme is a big protein. It takes in a substrate and then spits out the product. And enzymes are important because our body works based on this enzyme. Without a malfunctioning enzyme, is usually translated into a disease. So understanding how this enzyme works is very critical. So in my case, we're looking at how this molecule dances. So if your protein is doing a tango and your substrate by itself is doing a break dance, if they come together, they can't keep those dances. They have to change their motion. They have to change those dances. So they have to dance together, and so now you look at it. So now how do you see how they're dancing? That's the question, right? How do you picture those dances? You can't see molecules. So that's why we employ a technique called spectroscopy. So in our technique, we use spectroscopy now to look at this dance of the molecules. And some people, if you talk to Jerry McNeil, who always likes to comment on my research, all I see are blips. So peaks like this are usually, they look like blips, but they mean a lot in terms of what the molecules are doing. All right. So in terms of the research, so how did I start this project that I'm doing at York? So I started with a small grant. I actually started with a BSc CUNY. So I used the BSc CUNY grant to establish preliminary data that Beth pointed out. You have to have some initial data to sell to the NIH and say, I can do this, and here's proof. So to do that, I used the money I got from BSc CUNY. I think I got 3 or 4 cycles of BSc CUNY, used that to develop some preliminary data, and then once I have enough preliminary data, I tend to now get some NIH funding. So that NIH funding, I think I got it on the second try. First try, didn't like it. I said, okay, I'm not gonna move. I'm gonna make the changes they want. And I did, and I got funded, eventually got funded. And now on the renewal of that same grant. So I've got it funded twice already, that same grant. Which reminds me I have to renew it again because it's expiring soon. So, but that's the idea. So you get started with a small grant, use that to develop your idea, and then put it together for a bigger grant and hope you get funded by it. So my record is not as extensive as Beth's. So I've had this research grant from NIH and some PSC CUNY. I've also been a part of some training grants for people, for our kids here at your college. One is the NIH funded MARC program, and then the other one is the COPI in one of Dean's mini thesis grant on inviting associate graduates to York for the pharmaceutical science major that we have developed here. So, do's and don'ts, as I said, is just what Beth said. Added something to it. Oh, things that I wish I had known. One thing is, maybe I should have had some psychology background for dealing with students in the lab or employees in the lab, because there will be some that are quite gung-ho and they will do what's necessary. Some need some motivation, and that sometimes is hard to mix together and find the right combinations for, especially if there's a lot of different types of personalities in the lab, so that's very difficult. That's one thing I don't know if I've handled already, but that's also difficult. I think I'll, as they say in court, I rest my case.
Well, thank you for timely that it is able to join us right now.
Crazy day.
So while the idea settles in, let me make a couple of observations. And let me tell you why I look for the diversity of presenters that we have. There often is something that is true, and Beth hinted at it. There is this sense among the humanities and the social sciences that their fields don't do grants. Their field, your fields do grants. They're maybe smaller grants, but they're just as valuable to pursue. And so in looking for colleagues to share their expertise, I thought, let's have a diversity of disciplines, rather than the inclination to view grants amenable as sciences or STEM. That is not a chemist or a biologist or an engineer. And so I decided, let's get someone for the sciences, get someone for the humanities that may have crossovers with the sciences, and let's get someone from the arts and sciences school that also does, picking up on something Ruel said, been successful in grants that are not pure research grants, but can be institutional or training grants. And so I want to thank the colleagues for being willing to do it. While we kill time waiting for Lydia to get settled in, I'm going to pick up on a couple of things that...
I work on a Mac, I have no idea
Okay.
where that thing is.
Pick up a couple of things that Lydia and Beth said. Wish she had psychological training of how to deal with TAs or postdocs or grad assistants. And I would extend the challenge there, especially if you've got several of those in your lab, whether the lab is a science lab or a non-science lab. But especially in relation to science labs, ensuring that you comply with all the regulations about the lab and what is supposed to be in the lab. Because not only will the PI or the co-PIs be jeopardized if they're non-compliance, but the institution can be fined. And so knowing, come back to Beth's point about, I wish I had known about the managing of the grant. There's a component of managing depending upon who are in your grant, what kind of work you're doing. You've got to pay as much attention to the who as to the what's happening with the facilities, the chemicals, the whatever you have. You just get a lot of trouble on that front. Ruel also talked about, and I suspect Beth may have talked about it, starting small, starting with PSC CUNY. Keep in mind that you don't want to get stuck in PSC CUNY. My advice and rule of thumb for PSC CUNY is once you've gone there 3 times, move out, go elsewhere. Maybe move to the CUNY Collaborative, which allows you to, and keep in mind the CUNY Collaborative grants are amenable to co-PIs, the collaboration outside of CUNY. You can collaborate with a colleague at St. John's, you can collaborate with a colleague at UCLA. You don't have to be collaborating with CUNY colleagues only on the CUNY Collaborative, but it is a higher echelon grant, and it allows you to have more of a preparation ground for the bigger ones, whether they are NSF or the NIH. So I would say, start small, but don't get stuck in PSC CUNY. decide to move up the hierarchy, so to speak.
Could
Both,
I add to that?
sure.
There are other CUNY grant mechanisms. I don't have a list in my head, but you look around, I had a small one that was funded by 200 by NSF on grant writing. And, it was a small grant. I mean, it's an example. There are other kinds of things. They're all, the School of Public Health, I just got one, a year ago. There are these things. So building on what Provost says about, you don't have to just think in terms of PSC.
And coming to the point that Beth mentioned, there are opportunities. Let's see by a show of hands, how many people have signed up for PIVA?
What is it?
So here's an opportunity for you to do what we tell your students. Go find out about it.
Find out.
PIVA. This allows you to get at your desktop announcements for grant opportunities. And it's a resource that the university spends a lot of money on, and I've heard that small complaint, not enough of our faculty are using it. There was a point where last year we were talking about just not continuing. So sign up and you'll know about many opportunities other than PSC CUNY Collaborative, or if you hear from colleagues with whom you're in touch at other CUNY schools. It also is a good thing if you're interested in grants, to bookmark the Vice Chancellor for Research's page. Periodically there are announcements. They have opportunities for things that you may be wondering about doing, and it's there. Very underutilized resources. Gillian Small keeps saying much of our resources and grants are underutilized. Faculty don't take the time to know, find out, or to keep themselves abreast. So I'm going to reserve the comments I've got on other things and just invite Lydia. Thanks, Lydia, for doing this. And we said in your absence that part of my job is to embarrass all the presenters by having your bios. So you can give me your bio, your big bio. And I'll just reinforce my request to take it back to your department. Help your other colleagues understand the expertise we've got locally, because the idea is to share people to benefit from the wisdom that is here.
All right, so how's everybody doing?
Good.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I repeat what the people before me have said. Just so you get a sense of my day, I had 2 meetings, the last one at which we were voting on the charter, so I didn't feel right leaving until after the vote had gone through.
And what was the vote?
I don't know. I literally, when they said move to vote, I went like this and ran out the room. So I don't know. Those 2 meetings were followed by this. This is followed by 2 exams. And just for dramatic effect, these are the tissues that have accumulated this morning. So I apologize if I sound a little.
And then you're gonna go write a grant proposal.
And then I'm gonna write a grant proposal.
Any more tissues?
No. Oh no, where's my box?
It's over here.
I had a box, I don't know where it went.
It's over here.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, all right, so hopefully, you know my name is Lydia Gonzalez. I'm in the Math and Computer Science Department, and you have my bio, so if if you're interested or have questions, just let me know. On the back, I have put a list of things that are listed under synergistic activities, and the only reason I put that there is that on National Science Foundation grants, they ask for this, and I've often been asked by other people, like, what'd you put there? And I don't know how I knew what to put there. I'm sure I asked someone at some point. So I decided to include that there in case anyone needed examples of that. I just, things you do, I don't know, experiences you have that are.
My son would say stuff.
No. Yeah, when I was in college, my desks were called Lydia's Stuff, Lydia's Stuff 2, Lydia's Stuff 3. I quickly learned that doesn't help. Anyway, my first grant, I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. This is probably not the best way to go about writing a grant. A colleague of mine, Dr. Nath, had this great idea for a math circle where we would invite students to hear lectures by different mathematicians, and the idea was going to be to challenge the underrepresentation of women and other minorities in mathematics. And we basically met for 3 days, and we're here till some ungodly hour, writing it up and putting it together and sending it out. And I don't know how that happened, but we ended up getting that grant. It was from the Math Association of America. But the reason I'm telling you this is when a woman calls me to let me know, by the way, congratulations, yes, this is great. She said, was that your first one? And I was like, whoa. Yeah, actually, why do you say that? And her information or her comment was really helpful in writing future grants. She said, you guys had a wonderful idea, it was very well written, but we had about like one line that kind of showed that a lot of undergraduates in mathematics kind of feel like they're outside the community, and that supportive environments might help to challenge this. And we had one citation, and it was sort of like, you have this wonderful idea, but it's not necessarily sitting in the research that already exists in this area. And so how is it you know that this might be successful in the future? Luckily, they were willing to give us a chance, and what I'm learning is that every time I either don't get something or get something with feedback, it helps you in the future. So I want to tell you about that. So that was my first grant, basically. That grant was renewed twice, which is as many times as we were allowed to renew, and then we had to move on to another funding source, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the future as well. Perfect. I put together my grants in 3 areas. So the first set of grants are grants related to this math circle, which is called the Tensor Scholars Program. And if you're on York Talk, you get messages from me about talks and things. If not, I can give you more information. That first funding source was the Math Association of America. And what happened is that when that ran out, we needed to keep the project going. So I turned to the American Association of University Women, and we have funding into next year. This is great because we have funding into next year. What's not great is that every 3 years I seem to be in the position of having to find a new funding source. So what we're working on now is I sent another proposal to the Math Association of America. Before doing so, I talked to them and I said, well, if we modify things, could we apply again? And they were more than happy to sit and talk to me and help me determine how much of a modification is something different and how much is not. And that was something that initially I didn't know when I started writing grants. I felt like the funding agencies over there, I do my work, I send it in, I put my fingers like this and hope that it goes. But they're very, very happy to, in most cases, to talk to you, bounce ideas back and forth. A lot of them have workshops themselves. That you can attend, or materials that they have. So we'll see how that's going. I also found a number of larger grants through the National Science Foundation that I am not going to work on after this meeting, but certainly over the summer. All right, group 2. So group 1 is grants related to Tensor. Group 2 is grants related to research. And right now, I have a bunch of PSC CUNY grants, basically. I've applied to other things. I have a lovely slide for you on all the things I didn't get, because I think there's something to be said for the fact that you have to try, and a lot of times things don't work out. But these are grants in terms of research, and I agree with what people have said there. There is this opportunity for us, which is great, but there are also other opportunities within CUNY and then outside of CUNY as well. On these, there's different categories, right? So there's now the traditional A, traditional B, and the enhanced award. And I'm happy to say that I was able to get at least one of each. So that's kind of interesting to me. And what they have is they have a website where they have a lot of examples of grants that people have written, and you can go there and get some information about that as well. Also, a lot of our colleagues have gotten these, so it's pretty easy to walk over to someone, hand your proposal and say, hey, would you mind reading this over and giving me your feedback. Sometimes what makes a lot of sense to us doesn't make any sense to the person that's reading it. It's like, what do you mean? I have this beautiful idea, and I was gonna do this and this and this and this, and then the person reads it and goes, past the first paragraph, I have no idea exactly what your proposal is about. So getting someone to read it definitely helps. All right, then I have category 3, grants of opportunity. These are grants that I applied for because someone sent me a message and I said, hey, I'm doing stuff anyway, might as well get some money for it. So this is my 3rd category. The first is a travel grant, which is very nice. But again, I didn't really have even any idea that I would be going to this conference, but a grant came by my desk. It's a small amount, it was a small application to write, so when I give it a try. The second is an example of something that's internal to York that you could use to run different events, whatever it is that you're interested in. It was the same sort of thing. I was already inviting speakers to come give talks on math education once a month. This thing comes by my desk and I say, hey, why not see if I can get somebody for it? And the third, the Tensor program runs a once a year Women in Math Day, but there was this grant that came by my desk, so hey, let's see if we can make it a 2-day project. So those are the three categories related to this Tensor project that I'm really invested in, having to do with my research. And the third is these grants of opportunity. Things come by, why not give it a try? So I have some things that probably other people have said as well. Maybe there's one in there that they haven't. The first is to always be on the lookout for possible funding opportunities, and also talking to our colleagues really helps, because people in my department and in other departments know the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. So just this morning, I got an email message from one of my colleagues saying, hey, here's a grant about math education that's looking specifically at women in math. That sounds like something you might be interested in. So that helps as well. Definitely talking to people, sharing your experiences, being open to different sources of funding. I said that initially that Tensor grant was funded by the Math Association of America, and then our money was running out, and I had to find something else. The something else ended up being a grant from the American Association of University Women, but my project really didn't fit exactly into what it is they wanted us to do. I had these talks that speakers were going to come give, and then actually after the students go to these talks, then we usually go out to a lunch or dinner with them, and they kind of try to break down these barriers and these ideas of who does math and who's good at math and that kind of stuff. Well, the American Association of University Women had something called a community grant. So what I was doing was fine, but I needed to have some sort of connection to the community if I wanted this. So, you know, some people might not be willing to change what they're doing, but if it's something that you're able to, that might open up funding opportunities. So what I did was I created a partnership with some local K-12 schools, actually middle and high schools. I don't have anything younger than that. And we had their teachers come in for trainings on like gender equity in math classrooms. So there was like a community aspect that way. And we also ran talks for their students at their school as well. So if you're willing to get a little creative about what you might want to do, you might be able to tap into something that originally you might not have had. What else do I have on this one? Oh, keep on top of paperwork. All right, there's not only just getting the application in, but making sure that you meet all the requirements of the grant. I mean, it would be terrible if you spent hours and hours writing something and there was some technicality that said that we couldn't apply for that. And in that respect, talking to the Office of Sponsored Research or the Research Foundation might be helpful. There might be a grant that York can only apply to once, and I might not know that someone in a different department is already working on that. And so if I don't check in ahead of time, I might put all this work together only to find out that one of you turned it in a day before me, and oh wow. So that's kind of helpful as well. The first few grants that I applied to and was rejected from, the feedback I got was, this is a great idea, but we don't think you're able to do this in the time that you said you would. And so I think that that was some good feedback too, in that a great idea is good, but if you don't have a way, if you don't have a mechanism by which you can actually deliver it, it's not gonna, you know, they don't want to invest in something that sounds good but isn't gonna work. And lastly, there has to be some sort of mechanism by which you can assess whether or not it worked well, where you can share with other people what it is you found and that kind of stuff. Seems pretty straightforward stuff. You let me know if, you know. So that's that one. Here's a few more. The top one I already talked to you about, right? If you share it with other people, that's usually very helpful because they'll have insights that you might have missed. It might make sense to you, but not to somebody else. The idea that multiple people are going to benefit from this. So this is a research, so what I did actually with the sensor program is I applied for a PSE CUNY grant to study the effects of the program. So I've been interviewing the students that were in the program. The idea here is that I'll have a set of data that I might be able to turn to say, hey, here's some information on how well this program has been running, or how poorly it's been running, or what I should change, or what I should improve. But now that body of data and analysis can be used as leverage for another grant, right? So I'm not going to go to the National Science Foundation to ask for a 5-year grant with the same grant proposal that I sent to the MAA for a 1-year grant that I could renew, right? But now that I have all this data coming in, hopefully I'll be able to put something together with that and say, look, now I have evidence of what's been going on and how it's been affecting students and the ways it might need to be changed in order to help students in the future. So I have that. Not all funding works the same way. Sometimes, for some reason, I have a grant where I can purchase almost anything I like, but I cannot purchase alcohol, which makes perfect sense to me, and I cannot purchase flowers. I don't know why I can't purchase flowers. I cannot purchase flowers. That's obviously not the most exciting thing to keep in mind, but a similar matter, I have a grant where I could use money to pay for speakers to come to campus. I can pay for their plane rides or their train rides, their hotel, meals on days they're traveling. But on the second grant that I got for the same program, I wasn't allowed to pay for travel. But I am allowed to pay them a stipend. So why not give them a stipend equal to the amount they spent on travel? But you have to know this when you write it in or it's not going to work. Is there anything over there that sounds interesting to you? No? We were told to keep this to 10 or 15 minutes, so I don't have much more to say except 2 things. The first is that when I first started, I didn't realize that I could call it. I mean, it seems so simple. I didn't realize that if I called the funding agency, they would be more than happy to talk to me about the projects. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but they are, and that was very, very helpful. Also, my colleagues are more than happy to talk to me about the projects. The administrators at the school, I mean, there's a couple of people have sat down with me and gone through grants as well. So that's good. The last comment is that you will get rejected over and over and over again, probably, and that this is normal.
You're running theme here.
Oh, good. Should we have one of those spiraling things, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's normal. That's what's going to happen. I'm actually on a committee that reviews grants, but I don't know how much I'm allowed to tell you because they're anonymous. And we sometimes have to have a method for getting the amount down. And so I know for a fact that there's some wonderful proposals that come in that just because of the sheer volume of proposals and the amount of funding aren't going to get funded. Not because they weren't wonderful, not because they didn't fit the criteria, not because we didn't think it would be a wonderful idea or whatever, but merely because that's the constraints.
So there is an element of arbitrary.
There is.
I would say there should be, yeah, there probably is.
Although they tried to make, well, speaking for NIH, they tried to make it objective. We'll talk about that later. There's a strong attempt.
Right.
But inevitably, some of it.
It's the same thing when we get applications for jobs.
That's what I was going to say. I was very, very appreciative that I got a job here. When I served on a search committee and we had a pile this high and we had to do the same thing. Okay, so how do we get this pile to this? That means that these people we're not really looking at very closely, but there could have been some wonderful people in there, but they just needs to be a method.
Do connections work? Help? Like who's writing your letters for you? And
No, you have to, there are rules. You're not allowed to have people who are friends, relatives, countrymen, etc.
not well-known names.
Well,
I mean, what brings your proposal to the top that?
we're gonna get a chance to look back in the discussion.
Sorry.
And what you're asking, which is important, connects to something that Beth said, and Lydia also said, and implicitly, we've got to follow the guidelines. If the guidelines say get letters of support, you do that. If the guidelines say don't letter of support, don't go asking people to. But we're gonna come back to some of those.
Yeah.
And
Although-
a point I would make, and I'm gonna amplify based on my own experience, There is arbitrariness, but there is structured arbitrariness. They've gotta get that big pile down,
Right, but they have to have.
and there's a structure to getting it, at least in my experience.
Who's writing the proposal does help. Just to give you an example, we had a proposal where someone was saying that they were going to run a kind of workshop for students around a certain kind of writing, but the person's background didn't make us believe that they had the expertise for that particular thing. So that's certainly, but, right, so you'll get rejected time and time again. Here are the ones I didn't get. You know, hey, why not? I'm gonna be honest. Right? What did I learn from these? The first one was quote unquote too ambitious. The second one I couldn't possibly pull off on my own. I really should have had more people involved. The third and the fourth, we were told that because of constraints that the category we applied to was actually being phased out. Had we known this earlier, we might have modified it so as to be in a category that wasn't going to be phased out. But again, you know, you learn. And here's two more I didn't get. And there's probably others, but maybe they're hiding in my computer somewhere. Anyway, that's really all I have to say, but I do appreciate your patience, and thank you very much.
So let's open up for comments, questions to Lydia, Beth, and Ruel.
Yeah, I wanted to know about the score on pilot project grants. Are those a good mechanism for first-time projects? And if you're collaborating with others at another school, how can you write them in the grant as outside consultants or supporters?
So SCORE is, you're not going to be allowed to do collaboration with SCORE. Because SCORE, as the mechanism is put up, it's supposed to be a grant to train you. So you can't have any collaborators on it. You can have a person supporting you, let's say, allowing you to use his instrumentation, allowing you to, say, be there in the summer to do some data collection. That's allowed. But to have a collaborator, per se, on that particular project, you're not allowed as a SCORE grantee. But you could apply for an area, let's say, which does not preclude collaboration. So you can have collaboration under an area grant, which is about the same funding level as a SCORE grant. But and it's we're qualified because it's supposed to be for undergraduate institutions. So areas
that don't have a lot of previous funding.
But if you're working with people that understand that they understand, like I have two colleagues that from another school, but one is like an evaluator and one person's a statistician. The one thing I didn't get when I was reading it is, can you hire people as like a consultant? Because some of those grant applications, if you read them, you have to like read them like five times over.
To read them 10 times. So
Yeah.
it's right up here, memorized in your head. So as you write, you're writing for the. That's how it goes.
So it's supposed to train you, but if you're not an expert in biostats and you might need extra
I think that's
assistance.
allowed. It's a matter of writing it. Like, for instance, for my grant, I didn't know how to synthesize molecules. So I had a portion there that says I'm going to have a technician that's solely going to do synthesis of this molecule. And they allowed it. So that's get funded.
And I learned a new kind of statistical software and procedure, and that was allowed to be put in. And I identified a specific person with expertise, and he got a letter and so forth. But that's it. That wasn't a pilot, but it's you must memorize practically the guidelines. Really.
Yeah, it has to be your idea altogether. You're just using them because you need them, but not collaborating with them in terms of developing them.
You needed to train you. That's what I was thinking. So the area grant is
more collaborative.
Okay.
R15. Matter of fact, they look for. I'm just on a panel right now. They look for. I forget what it's called. The environment. I forget what the language. I wrote it down. I think it's the environment, which means, the who's the package of collaborators?
Mhm.
And does each niche that you need fulfilled, do you have an appropriate person with an appropriate budget to do that?
Elizabeth?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this gets to both the issue of knowing your funder and guidelines and being able to have those questions, the questions that just got answered. So a couple of you mentioned picking up the phone and just calling an agency. What I'm wondering about is, have any of you ever actually tried to get a face-to-face meeting, and is that helpful? I've had sort of stilted phone conversations, and sometimes I wonder, should I just get on the train and go down to DC and try to meet with these people in person? Is that,
I wouldn't go without making an appointment.
of course, but in other
You know,
words,
I've gotten some people I haven't done that much, but sometimes you get someone who's super helpful, makes an appointment with you, puts aside an hour to talk on the phone, and sometimes you get somebody who really doesn't,
Who's in a hurry?
what,
Who's in a hurry?
is in a hurry.
I've been lucky, I've always had people that were willing, maybe not the moment I called, but were willing to say, okay, call me back, let's work on a phone appointment.
Let me add two things to what has been said about that. Yes, it is helpful sometimes, but it is better to figure out, along with the director-sponsored research, if you should make that call or she should make that call. And sometimes her making the call paves the way for a follow by you. But it is also true that the follow could be a sit-down follow. And in that respect, keep two things in mind. Vice Chancellor Small's office has small grants to facilitate going to Washington to do sit-down. Particularly when it's collaborative. If colleague from here, colleague from Hunter, colleague want to have a big idea, and before getting started, you want to go to Washington, meet a program officer, she would call me and say, I have some colleagues of yours, can you match it? I can say, yeah, I got 20%, you got 80%, right?
Right.
But the idea is that the university understands, and again, not many colleagues take that opportunity. So yes, the sit down is possible. It is sometimes better for the way to be paid by the sponsored research person, and we can find a way to get you to be there. But there's something also that the university has done, and I know Dawn has tried it here with not much success. Sometimes we can have program officers come here,
Oh, yeah, we had Hinder.
but sometimes we make a call, few people show up, nobody shows up.
Right, you know,
At the university, sometimes bring program officers to a place in Manhattan for CUNY,
Right.
and you would be surprised at how embarrassed Julian Small is when big university like this, 2 or 3 or 4 people show up. So yes, it is possible to have not only you're going for the sit down, but they're coming to talk about opportunities.
Can I add to that? Before you speak to, I'm sure Lydia did it, before you speak to a program officer, have a concept paper in front of you, have it thought through in your head, don't ask, what should I do?
and don't ask like, can I do X when X is written in the
Right.
regulations,
Yeah.
because then it's like you're wasting my time.
Yeah.
So you should have read it, yeah, definitely, I completely agree.
yeah, it's more about making that connection
Right.
and getting basically.
Yeah.
You're talking about these big grants, right? So,
Yes,
yeah, but you're also talking, I mean, the grants that I've applied for have been for my own projects, right? Not educational
Mine are in education.
and the thing that I have found, that it has discouraged me, and I will say that to be open, the amount of time that it takes.
Yeah.
Like I actually I have a friend who does this for a living, and I made an appointment with her. She told me, research all the people on the board. You know, I mean, it took hours and hours, and then you have to get all the letters, and
It's an
you know,
investment.
it
With no
was like,
guaranteed
and I
payoff.
finally got to the point, frankly, before I became chair, where I said, you know, the amount of time it's taken me to write your proposal, call on the phone, but research this, I could just write the article. And then,
You
so I
can do
started,
it with that, I've done with no money, and as I said before, sometimes the time that is taken in administering a grant, getting the students, training the
Right.
students, you know, fixing all the glitches, the RF, the IRB, et cetera,
so how do you weigh that? But I mean, you've done, it, you know, I'm at a point now where, you know, I got a book contract. But, you know, especially in the humanities, it's kind of like you've got to raise, in order to have color reproductions in my book, I have to raise the money. To, you know, I'm like, okay, it's like a whole other job, right? Well,
unless it's a portion. I mean, sometimes there are publication fees, and
but can you address that? I mean, just the time that it takes.
You're
It's
right.
a lot of time, right?
It is.
Definitely
It's a
enormous
lot of
amount of
time.
It definitely is a lot of time. It's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
I think one of the nicest things I did was starting to include student researchers on projects, but that was
a
also
lot of time.
exactly.
Oh,
There were things that I assumed this person would know how to do that they didn't necessarily know how to do. And so there was a lot of like, I mean, everything from, we're calling for participants, please do not say, have you gotten the letter and why didn't you turn it in?
Yep.
You know, like they're volunteering, you know, you have to, now we have a mound of data and you need
So
to
you
discuss
didn't
it.
pay them, they volunteered?
Do an independent study.
Well, that's what the editor of the press, she's like, get a graduate student, you know,
Well, you
not
can't give
pay
them credit. Oh, well, sometimes
Oh,
the
to pay the
graduate
students.
center you can.
Oh, I thought you meant the participants. I actually have paid this, I have written in money to pay the students. I wonder if there's something you could do with like an independent study, if
Good.
perhaps they,
Sure.
you know, as a way of involving students if you don't have to.
If you want to involve students for the sake of involving students and your own growth and theirs, but don't, in my experience, don't expect that a student's gonna know
Yeah.
a lot. This is an undergraduate,
Yeah,
so it's a training.
that's true.
Yeah, let me make 2 points apropos that, and then I want to have us revisit Linda's initial question about, is it all subjective? Humanities also have grants, small, and if you keep abreast of the bulletin that Don sends out, it tells you what the field is, what the area. But here is how many humanities areas and social sciences areas can get bigger than normal grants. Interdisciplinary. There are a number of grants that are agencies are asking a chemist to come to work with a sociologist, asking a biologist to work with an anthropologist, and you can look for the interdisciplinary opportunities to make your grant feasible. But again, coming back to paying for things like images, the university has a mechanism that can support that. Talk to
We
Don,
don't know this.
go to the website of Vice Chancellor Small.
I guess Vice Chancellor.
Yeah, right.
So this is, I'm writing this thing down
Right.
too.
So
That's
she,
the
like,
small-
she's interested in STEM.
She is the Vice Chancellor for research. But she's not the Vice Chancellor only for science and engineering research. She wants to be able to facilitate the humanities and social sciences. So look for opportunities for those interdisciplinary connections, but also $2,000-3,000 maybe there to cover small projects. Colleague in your department got one 2 years ago. Ken Josephs. It was just $2,000, but it helped to pay for some of the things that the humanities work on. I want us to come back to,
I have one more. There's somebody else in Jillian Small's office, Avram Kaplan,
Right.
who's sometimes more accessible because he's not, he's her second in command.
right, and he's been here several times, you know our
And
community.
he, and he likes us.
There, right?
You can call him, email him, and see what you can
go to
set up.
graduate center.
No, not the
No,
graduate
they're not
center.
at the
Not the
graduate
graduate
center.
center, this is
No more
42nd
80th Street.
Oh,
Second.
But I would say before going there, look on the website
Okay.
and see what opportunities are, and if you go or call, you've got questions about things that you see or know, or want more information about.
I wonder too, in addition to this being interdisciplinary, is if there were a way of linking it back to the school as a whole, to education somehow, you might be able to do something that way.
maybe students can learn from your work, maybe there's a seminar you can develop, something
That's another
that hooks it into education.
Another job.
Yeah,
You just confirmed.
Just
Well, no,
recognize
there-
it,
there-
that's
there
all,
is-
just,
there is
no, don't put
everything
blinders on.
good about being cautious about it's a job. But there's everything also good about
Yeah.
being a person interested in pursuing the job.
Yeah.
And as well and Beth and Lydia experienced, when you do it once or twice or thrice, you get to know how to do it more efficiently over time. And so you know what do's and don'ts to be careful about from the get-go. So I would say, don't let the job onerous, the pre-award, onerous, the post-award, don't let that deter you.
yeah, I don't know, like when you asked the question, I didn't know what to say, because honestly, if you say, does it take a lot of time, of course it takes a lot of time. But other things take a lot of time too, and I guess it's just up to the individual to determine whether that's the time they wanna spend there. I love this program, this math circle we have going, the students are great, and it's a lot of time, but I get something out of it, like personally too, not just something to write on my CV, so.
Ruel, Beth, or Lydia, could you, and maybe others who have had grant experience,
I think,
I want to spend a minute or so on Linda's initial question. How do we ensure that when we apply, and we are one of 300-400, how do we get in that pile where you can actually have the review do something with your application? How to minimize, or how to increase the odds that you will be in the 100 or 50 or whatever small group that's actually going to be acted on?
Know the funder, have a good idea, have the pilot data, have a couple of people pre-review it, and be willing, psychologically and time-wise, be willing to hear criticisms, and be willing to spend the time in thorough revisions. What you think is a great idea, somebody else may, like Lydia said, what are you talking about? I don't get this. I saw that on the review panel with the PSC CUNYs, some of them, I'm sure everybody thought they had great ideas, some of them you couldn't figure out what was gonna happen, and those go to the bottom, so to speak.
I think,
Yeah, and no, a good idea, have somebody review it, put in the legwork in the beginning, know the guidelines. You're right, it takes hours and hours to read and practically memorize those guidelines, so that if they say 4 pages, you don't submit it with 5, because that's sent back right away.
I think the other thing is to customize it to where it is you're sending it to. So if they have a mission statement where they're looking for certain things,
Right.
then find a way of tying in what you're
Integrate.
writing to that. It's your great idea, but it supports their vision as
Yeah.
well, kind of thing.
Ruel?
No, I pretty much agree with what they said. Be ready with comments, always address the comments, and guidelines. Because if you miss the guidelines, especially NIH and NSF, they have page counters.
Yep.
So if you submit something that's the wrong page number, it doesn't even go to the
Yep.
panel.
That's right.
It gets rejected, so.
I'm going to ask Dr. Radical, who has had experience in writing grants, to say a comment on this, but I want to share, apropos exactly what you said, my first major grant experience. 2 lessons learned. I had submitted a pre-proposal to U.S. Institute of Peace, part of their process, and I had submitted a small pre-proposal, given their guidelines, to the MacArthur Foundation. Within 3 months, I got a rejection from the U.S. Institute of Peace. And so and this is my first mistake, first bit of advice, I mistakenly thought that since U.S. Institute of Peace was not interested in my project, MacArthur Foundation would not be interested in the project. Bad idea. And so 2 weeks before the deadline for the full proposal, I got a call from the MacArthur Foundation saying, we did not see your follow-up to your pre-proposal. So I had a stupid idea of saying, well, I thought that simply said, did we tell you we're not interested? You can't use what another agency does as a way of gauging what we would do. And I had the benefit of that person's wisdom along the lines. she said, we're gonna ask you for 4 pages, do not give us 4 pages on one line. She said, MacArthur Foundation, we get thousands of these. Here's a structured part. Internally, we go first to see who does not follow all the guidelines. You have 5 pages, you ask for 4,
That's
5.
right.
She said, we're gonna ask you for, we're gonna say you're gonna get a maximum of X amount of money. Don't ask for a penny more. Ask for a penny more, pile.
Yeah.
So it is
Yeah,
ad
it
hoc,
could be brilliant.
but it is structured in that they're looking to reduce that big number.
Yeah.
And the first cut, before it goes to the panel,
Yeah.
is to see who does not. And so this woman took the trouble of sitting down for like half an hour on the phone. She's calling from California, MacArthur Foundation is. I was teaching at Lehman College. And she said, she was from the office, I like your idea. I want to see it succeed. And she walked me through how not to be rejected in that first go around. So there is a method to the madness, and you've got to follow the guidelines. And that was an eye-opening experience to me. And of course, once I did that, and then I got one small envelope, which is another message for you. Didn't want to open it for a while. Didn't want to hear bad or good. So I had a mentor who after a while said, I got to open that damn envelope. and the darn envelope actually said, you've made it to the next round. Here's what you got to do to succeed in the next round. So you sometimes have gotten my messages, don't mope for too long.
Right. Get
Well,
one
that's
day,
true.
pity party for one
Mope
day.
for a couple of days and then pick yourself up, buy a glass of
Right,
wine, or
right.
buy a mojito, whatever it
Right.
is, make you feel good, and move on. But there is a method to the madness of putting that huge pile in a reasonable pile that now is going to go to the review. Dr. Leifer?
Thank you, Provost. What I want to say is never be afraid of rejection. Rejection is part of the process. When it's rejected, I mean, there's a lesson there to pick up, because I remember my first grant for SBA when I came to New York. It was rejected. And 2 weeks after the rejection, there's another new RFP. I jumped in again, and I got that one. And the excitement was there when we got $99,000. And a year later, another one came. I went in for it, rejected. I asked myself, I thought I was good. So we packaged again, and we got a new one again, $250,000. So never take rejection badly. It's part of the process. There's a lesson there for you to pick up. And like the other speakers have said, at times it's good to learn from one another. You know, don't think they are not part of your area of discipline. Reach out to many people, you pick a lot of words and transfer.
You know, the proposal I thought was my best, my most brilliant thing. Have you go. We don't want it.
Other questions, comments?
Can you talk a little bit about the role of outcomes in grants? I mean, it's taken for granted that you do research and you want to publish, okay? And Lydia touched on the role of assessment. So most of the times you will have to write some sort of a report saying this is what we did, this is the outcomes. But in terms of maybe Beth or maybe Lydia will, of going to that next level, having that follow-up grant, you know, what role does the research publications play?
Crucial. If you don't show the product from the money they gave you, and the product is the publication, that's what they're not so much interested in conferences or talks. You know, this wouldn't count for anything, say, but they want publications, and what's it called, Bob? The thing in the library where they rate the publications.
Oh, like a
Impact factor.
Impact factor. So the higher the impact factor, the more gold stars you get.
That's what we look for in the PhD.
But if you don't publish, you know, forget about the next round. And there are also annual reports, but those are, you know, sort of pro forma. So that's.
Any other questions, comments?
I just wanted to add, I've gotten some grants at North Carolina State University, and I think you're speaking to sort of a credibility issue. And I think one of the things that you always have to convince your funder of is that you really can do this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, right.
So one of the ways is that hard work. In some ways, the work before you start the grant is harder because nobody's sitting there saying, look, you're doing this, you're doing this.
You have
You're
to
getting
do
no
it for
recognition.
yourself.
You're just kind of turning away.
Right.
Nobody knows what you're doing.
True.
But then once you have a record, that track record can make a real difference. And the other piece is finding, for the ones where you can collaborate, finding credible collaborators, putting together a team. Like, it was a team grant, and since it was on chemical engineering discourse where we studied how chemical engineering students spoke, women and men.
Chemical engineering students speak?
They do when they're planning their projects. We found a foundation that had just gotten funded that was interested in gender equity in it was chemical engineering, right, in the STEM disciplines. And they were very interested to see that we had a chemical engineer, a linguist, myself, and one other person as well, kind of seeing how the team can come together. And so even if you don't have full credibility on your own, you can build into the grant these other people that can support your credibility.
And that ties into something that Lydia said, and I wrote it down, and they've heard it, but not written down with the others. Talking to people. And I would say not just talking to people within your own institution, but talking to people in your network. You go to conferences, if you're part of professional organizations, maybe there's a listserv, maybe you're a Facebook friend of a particular colleague or an association. That helps you to not only hear opportunities for grants, but invite people to a review. You know, I'm working on this thing, maybe there's a partner thing, I can review yours, you review mine, and I'm not gonna tell you in harsh, nasty words that it sucks.
Right.
But
I'll tell you
sometimes-
nicely.
Right.
I'll tell you, say it
And
nicely.
we need to have, and this is the point I heard stressed by everyone, you need to have the thick skin to not feel that your wonderful idea and all the time you spent on it is going to naught. And don't try to cuss the final reviews out.
Yeah.
Because again, and I think Beth made the point more candidly, sometimes we are all caught up in our own fields. We know what we're writing, but it's being reviewed by some people who are not expert in your particular area. And so you've got to write for people to understand the stuff. Forget the jargon.
Right.
The jargon may be good if you're doing a paper in your field or talking to your grad students or two, but you've got to write for an audience that can understand the concept and the methodology and the notion you want. And I've said to several colleagues here and elsewhere, don't mope over the fact that the people say your stuff, to use my son's favorite term when he was in college, sucks. Maybe you need to write it so that other people can understand it. And so beating up on the people, you're not going to go to this agency anymore, these people, it doesn't help. If you want to be in the grant business, as if you want to be in the writing of articles and book business, you're going to have colleagues commenting your work. And you just have to be willing to have that as part of your thick skin to deal with rejection, to deal with recommendations for revision, to deal with people who may not have the highest integrity. And that is an underlying text of this business, much as it is the business of sending out your articles. People do stuff that is not up and up, the ideas that you may have and didn't pass muster, next thing it becomes somebody else's idea. Just can't be out of the game or feel so rejected that you're not going to pursue any others.
You know, it makes me think of many years ago, one of my early NIH proposals, I asked Lou Levenger to read it because he was an experienced forensic person. And he knows nothing about my field. I certainly don't know about biology. And he read it as a knowledgeable person, generally knowledgeable, and I couldn't believe all the red marks on it. Lou, are you kidding? But they were wonderful comments. They helped. I had to revise the whole thing, complete revision. But what I'm saying this for is, it doesn't even have to be someone in your field. It can be someone who writes, that's your business. Someone who writes well, or who can just say, it's not clear, I don't know what you're saying here.
Well, we're coming to you.
Thanks, Pat, as well. A colleague in biology at Brigham College mentioned that they have a sort of an official structured program within their department where, especially younger faculty are mentored in grant writing by older faculty, and it'll actually, senior faculty will send out, they'll take those draft grants and send them out to colleagues, external colleagues for review. And sometimes that provides a little bit harsh, because you know, a good friend is not going to give you necessarily always the straight talk, but if it's sort of mediated through that other person.
Then he's not a good friend.
It's a good friend if you can't get to really deep.
But, and you know, we've done something much more informal in our department like that, but it's nothing to think about.
I think that's great too, because there's a motivation there. Every time the group meets, you're gonna discuss something, so that needs to be done by the next meeting. And I remember when they weren't grants, but when I first started writing articles, I would argue with people. No, I need that word. That word means this to me. And, you know, like stupid arguments, whereas when I started actually listening to the feedback I was getting and really incorporating it, not just like looking like you did, that the product is much better. Because think of all these people that are giving you feedback as opposed to just your one idea. So,
well, one of the things
I
I
don't
do
like
propose
harsh
that is
feedback.
I've used my family.
Oh, yeah.
My daughter hated me when she was in college. Daddy, do I have to read this again? Well, you'd be amazed when you know, she's in college, and if she said that, I don't understand this. I'm writing a piece now that's coming out in a few months, and I sent it to her. The first page. She said, why didn't I think of this?
Yeah,
it's true.
She made all these corrections.
you got the red line.
I felt great, and I said, well, I put my money in having you go to college. In grad school, straight up, but you have to have somebody sometimes who is not as vested in you, in the project as you. Just read it and say, this is an intelligent person. Does this person understand what you read?
Just to plug into talking to other people, just because I have it in front of me, we have this wonderful tool now at CUNY, the CUNY Academic Commons. Wonderful areas there for you to establish your networks, even in your expertise, or perhaps a little bit out of the expertise, and get spin off some ideas there, you know, run some ideas there, and see what feedback you're getting there from CUNY internal. This is now increasingly being recognized as a national model for academic commons. So it's a growing, very dynamic area. Some professors use it in their teaching in the classroom. So there's a lot going on, and really encourage everybody to, you know, at least peruse and browse, if not become part of, you know, some of these specialized groups that are established.
I know Kelly is on it. I know Rishi is on it. I know that Michael Smith is on it. There are a number of your colleagues who, and this is, as Father said, the model now that many universities are looking to see how we can benefit from the CUNY Commons. Let's, in the context of winding down, let me share a couple of items going forward. And the first one comes under the rubric of no such thing as a free lunch. that there is work. What we normally do is say to all the participants, not the presenters, take, and in this case, 10 days, do a 1 to 2 page reflection on today. Is there anything that you learned today that might help you to think how you go about grants? Is there anything that kind of inspires you to write a grant or go for a different kind of grant? Just for you to reflect, and we want to know how helpful you would have been. But connected to that is, what we normally do is ask each of the presenters to be willing to serve as a mentor. So if you have, coming out of this, an idea for a grant or for rewriting an existing proposal, I want to be able to turn to Beth or Ruel or Lydia to say, not to write the grant for you, not to rewrite it for you, but to give you advice on maybe how to sharpen something. So the idea is to see how we can use this not only as a talking platform, but a platform that helps each of their colleagues who wants to go there, and in this case, going for grants or different grants to be successful going forward. So I'm gonna ask each person to send a 1 to 2 page. It doesn't have to be long, 3, 4 paragraphs, but I really thought it would be important for each of us to reflect. Send it to Dawn by the end of this month. It'll be 1 page, page and a half. The idea is to reflect a little bit on it. And then depending upon what we find as people's willingness to go forward, I will ask Beth or ask Ruel. There's a colleague who is thinking of X. Do you mind if he or she approaches you to get some feedback? So that. I normally at the beginning of the sessions would evoke the name of Tip O'Neill. So I'm going to evoke his name at the end. And Tip O'Neill, long-standing member of the House, he was a speaker for a long time, put in the vocabulary of political scientists the notion of all politics being local. And I often say that all research is local. Start with an individual collaborating in a department. And so the whole idea is to tap into the local expertise. You've got local interests, you also have local expertise. And the value of the colleagues here today, Lydia, Beth, and Ruel, is not only the fact that they've written grants successfully, failed on some, succeeded on most, but also they serve on reviewers, on panels to review other people. So they bring to the expertise, the local expertise, how they have seen it succeed as a person reviewing. Please use the local expertise that is here. You've got an incredible expertise. And keep in mind that we've got, as I mentioned, university opportunities that are sometimes underutilized. So if you don't know what Pivot is, you can find out and subscribe. If you have a general practice of just deleting that bulletin that comes from Dawn to the grant opportunities, just don't delete it. Maybe open page 4 and see what's in there. Because we try to say to you, here are the opportunities, but many colleagues don't read them, or at least we don't think they read them. Don't underutilize the existing facilities, either at the college or at the university. And finally, I want to thank everyone, the presenters, and each of you for coming and spending some time. Hopefully, we will have learned enough to either revisit how we do some things, or to visit things that we thought of doing and didn't really want to go there. We've got a lot of local expertise, and the time is now for us to use it. So that's for cost of your free lunch. Thank you, guys.